Hello everyone, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Season's greetings to you all. Welcome to the Dalek Bumps Christmas Q&A. Today I'll be answering questions posted to my community page by my subscribers. So let's get started. Parako and Gasman both asked, what type of Dalek is my favourite? This is a tricky one because, to be honest, there isn't a single design of Dalek that I dislike. In terms of the overall look, I'm very fond of the bronze Daleks, but in terms of colour scheme, I've always loved the black and silver Daleks from Death to the Daleks. And of course, I adore the Imperial Daleks. I Don't Like It Productions asks, do you think the Paradigm Dalek design could have been better, the shape rather than the colour? It's interesting you asked that because, in all honesty, I think the shape of the Paradigm Daleks is just fine. Even before the refit that toned down the hunched back, I thought the actual design itself looked really cool. Sure, it's a radical deviation from previous Dalek designs, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think what truly tripped up the Paradigm was the bright, plasticky looking gloss effect used for the colours, and the fact that they chose to debut one Dalek of each design in some old cigar factory backroom. They never got off the first rung really, and it's a shame because, as I say, I genuinely like the Paradigm Dalek design and I want them to return one day. Augustus Aurelius asks, do you prefer serious, borderline grim/dark Dalek stories or whimsical, more light-toned Dalek stories? I think the answer to this question depends on what medium I'm experiencing the story in and what mood I'm in when I go to watch, read or listen to a Dalek story. In terms of TV episodes, I'd much prefer Dalek stories that depict the Daleks as a powerful, near unstoppable force, and I do enjoy the more grim and dark stories like Genesis of the Daleks. However, humour is a really important part of Doctor Who, so my favourite representation of the dark side of the show is in the sarcastic, grim humour of Revelation of the Daleks. For audios, I'm more partial to some silly or funny scenarios. Listening to a grim audio can be a real downer, especially since you have to imagine everything that's going on, so having something to lighten the mood makes it more fun. I'm talking stories like Davros, The Curse of Davros, and We Are the Daleks. That's also why I think Jubilee is so popular. It's the perfect blend of horrific and hilarious. Christopher Hamlet asks, if you could create a new Dalek design to replace the standard bronze Daleks, what would it look like? It might sound like a boring choice, but I'd probably adapt the classic series design, as to be honest, I think with just a few tweaks it's still perfect. Just like how the Mondasian Cybermen were brilliantly translated into the modern era with just a few changes to the costume design. I think with maybe an updated midsection, a thicker base, maybe slightly larger dome lights and a few embellishments here and there like we see on the bronze Daleks, and the classic Dalek design could easily return as the standard Dalek design to great effect. Imperium asks, do you prefer the pupil on the Dalek eye stalk seen on Daleks from the late 60s to 80s, or just a lens as seen on Daleks from the 60s and the 2000s onwards? Personally, I prefer the lens design as it looks more alien. The expanding and contracting effect on the eye stalk lens from the 60s is a great effect that can be used to make the Daleks much more expressive, whereas the dot pupil seems a bit lifeless. If the pupil could move within the eye stalk, that would be creepy, but then it wouldn't really seem very Dalek-like. I quite like the organic design of the pupil from the Paradigm Dalek eye stalks though, as if the mutant flesh is like extending through the Dalek casing. I think that's pretty cool. Rue HR asks, if you were the showrunner of Doctor Who, what would the names of your Dalek stories be? That's an interesting question. I've had an idea for a sort of Dalek light story called The Children of the Daleks, involving the Doctor encountering like a society made entirely of basically young adults living in the ruins of a former human colony world that was ravaged by the Daleks, leaving only a handful of children as survivors who then go on to establish a brutal society valuing Dalek ideals, and the Doctor has to try and bring them back from the brink before they essentially become a marauding band of Dalek worshippers. But that's the only of the Dalek story title that I've actually got, an actual story idea for that justifies the Of the Daleks naming convention. However, I've always been a big fan of R-word Dalek episode titles, like Resurrection of the Daleks, Revelation of the Daleks, Remembrance of the Daleks, Revolution of the Daleks, all great. Although we've also had the audios Return of the Daleks, Restoration of the Daleks, and Renaissance of the Daleks, so maybe the R-word title thing has been done to death. In fact, we need more Dalek titles like Daleks in Manhattan and Into the Dalek that use the word Dalek without necessarily being a something of the Daleks, Bubba Healthy asks the big question, why are you so into Daleks? What made you want to know more about them and put that info on the internet, and what was my first Dalek story? I'll answer these questions in reverse order. My first Dalek story, at least the first one that I remember, is quite fittingly Remembrance of the Daleks. Though I have very vague, murky memories of maybe seeing Genesis of the Daleks when I was really, really young. Remembrance was the first Doctor Who episode I watched that made me a Doctor Who fan, and that was not long before the new series first aired, so when Christopher Eccleston and Billie Piper's first series came out, I was already a fan. The reason why I want to put information about the Daleks on the internet is twofold. On the one hand, I really love the Daleks and want to create a means by which people can learn more about them. Also, I've been reading about Daleks and experiencing stories involving Daleks since I was a kid. I've got loads of knowledge about them, and I want to preserve that knowledge in an archive so that even if I do, move on one day and leave the Daleks behind, the passion I have for them now will be preserved, hopefully forever. And to answer the first question of why I love Daleks so much in the first place, it's a difficult one, but I think the main reason is that I love Doctor Who more than just simply as a show, but like as a wonderful, whimsical storytelling engine that's so much bigger on the inside, and the Daleks are such an integral part of that. They're the ultimate universal boogeyman, the definitive villains. They're a tragic tale, a powerful force, a relentless, tenacious character that refuses to be defeated, that always pulls themselves back from defeat, failure, and even near total destruction. Sure, they're a representation of hate, fear, and horrific loathing, but they're a mirror of all the things we fear and hate about ourselves, making them the definitive counter to humanity. In other words, the ultimate foe for Earth and its people. So to answer your question, I think the reason why I love the Daleks so much is that I find them so interesting. I love everything about them, from the cadences of their voices to the colours of their casings, and above all else, their stories. Wren asks, do you plan on making a custom Dalek ship? Do I have plans to make customs to order, and where do I get my custom pieces from? So at some point in the future, I do want to branch out my customs to more elaborate designs, more projects like the Paradigm Dalek Emperor, which you can see in the shorts tab on my channel page, but I currently don't have any plans to make customs to order. I currently do it as a hobby to relax, and I don't really want to, put pressure on myself by monetizing the art, essentially. This also relates to the answer to the last question, in that all my customs come from Dalek bundles I got from friends or from eBay or from charity shops. I've been collecting for years, so it's just slowly accumulated over time. I don't have a reliable source of Dalek parts or figures. I tend to just pick up what I can where I can and use upcycled parts from old computers and things to make pieces for the more extensive customs. However, in the future, I might invest in a 3D printer, which could potentially shake things up dramatically, both in terms of sourcing parts and potentially making small batches of customs to sell, though that's just an idea, nothing concrete on that as of yet. Zab Venegas asks, if you could write a Dalek episode / story arc for the new series, what would it be about? That's a very good question, one that I've pondered for years. My ideas about what would make a good and meaningful Dalek story have changed a lot over time. In my younger years, I would have focused entirely on some gigantic, transgalactic space opera showcasing Dalek fleets annihilating planets and enslaving populations, and it would all be very grandiose with lots of epic space battles and emotional sacrifices and things going zappy zappy pew pew. That's all well and good, and will probably make for an excellent basis for a Dalek spin-off series. But more recently, I've come to realise that in terms of Doctor Who itself, the best Dalek episodes are the ones that focus on the relationship between the Doctor and the Daleks, or alternatively, the Daleks and humanity on a personal level. If the Daleks are ever going to break out of the constant cycle of showing up again with a huge fleet or army only to be once again defeated by the Doctor, rinse and repeat, the Daleks need to exist as an entity beyond Doctor Who itself. Hopefully the new Bad Wolf Productions and Disney Plus era of the show will expand Doctor Who as a franchise beyond just Doctor Who the show, and allow the Daleks more room to explore different kinds of stories without it all having to eventually feed back to the Daleks are all blown up so we can move on to the next episode where, alien sea monkeys build a space casino in Victorian London. The best story arc for the Daleks in Doctor Who is one that would span multiple settings and conflicts, allowing the Daleks to have victories that don't derail the main story, focusing specifically on the relationship between the Daleks and the Doctor, or even better, the Daleks and the Companion. So to answer your question, I'd probably establish a new status quo for the show, in which Daleks are ravaging the universe in the far future, and the Doctor's companion has some specific drive, some personal motivation to want to go fight them. The Doctor, having been through the whole Dalek hatred arc with the Time War and post-Time War character development of the 9th, 10th, 11th and 12th Doctors, wants to keep the companion out of the fight, but simultaneously recognises that the Daleks are a threat that needs to be fought, and that their companion has every right to want to save the universe from a horrific army of genocidal monsters. So the Doctor and companion balance light-hearted, whimsical time travel adventures with the occasional high-stakes dive into this far future war with the Daleks, each of which furthers the ongoing story in that time period. That way we can have big epic Dalek stories that carry the Doctor's character development further, are particularly significant to the character development of the companion, and can fully demonstrate the power of the Daleks without recycling the constant Daleks invade Earth, buttons get pushed, Daleks die trope. And for an added bonus, the events of the Dalek episodes in Doctor Who could then impact the ongoing events of Dalek-themed spin-offs that are also airing at the same time, creating a sense of shared universe. Reese Ends asks, which is your favourite Dalek in the collection? That's a very difficult question. I have lots of favourites, to be honest. I'm particularly proud of my customs of specific Dalek characters, the likes of Rusty, the Jubilee Dalek, the Prime Strategist, etc. I put a lot of effort into all my customs, but those ones are particularly special because I'm creating an entirely unique figure of a one-of-a-kind Dalek character. In terms of official figures, my most prized ones are, unsurprisingly, the most rare ones. Emperor Davros, the Special Weapons Daleks, and the spray-painted Invisible Dalek, for example. Time Controller asks, what is your favourite Dalek Empire and why? This might be a controversial choice, but I really like the status quo for the Daleks that was established during the Chibnall era. Russell T Davies's era had some decent but short-lived Dalek empires, and it was difficult to tell what was going on with the Daleks during the Moffat era. I've done like 5 videos on it now, and I'm still not entirely sure. But the Chibnall era was where I felt the Daleks got back in gear. They're a time-travelling empire of marauding exterminators who loom over time and space with their war fleets and death squad ships. I also like how Flux presents us with a scenario that leaves the door open for the next showrunner. We know the Daleks have suffered a catastrophe, but we don't know yet what effect it will have on them as an empire. They could bounce back immediately in Series 14, or maybe the writers used this as an opportunity to introduce a new design, with the justification that the Daleks had to completely rebuild after losing so many of their ships and warriors. I suppose the only downside with the Chibnall era Daleks is we don't really know who their leader is or what the leadership body is, other than the vague references to some sort of Supreme Command or High Command, but in a way I suppose less is more. Mr. Top Hat asks, do you prefer the Daleks only having a few leaders and mainly being made up of drones, or do you prefer a fully fledged hierarchy with different armies, fleets, navies, science groups, a Supreme Council and Emperor? This is an interesting question. Generally speaking, I prefer standardised Dalek colour schemes, as from a character point of view, I think that it's the most realistic depiction of the Daleks. After all, they wouldn't really need to differentiate other Daleks based on the colour of their casings. They could easily use, the pathweb or whatever to identify other Daleks, so the different casing colours seems redundant and almost anti-Dalek. However, having said that, I can't deny that I think any alternate Dalek colour scheme or design is cool, and I happily accept any excuse to introduce one or many. Ideally, I'd go for a balance between the system of the paradigm and the standardised Daleks. Drones and low-ranking leaders should have identical casings, with alterations only for specialist Daleks of, different ranks, like the different dome colorations for guards, for example. I think the Time Squad from Time Lord Victorious was a great example of this method done right. The Prime Strategist, Chief Scientist, the Executioner Daleks, they all have different casing designs, but all the subordinate Daleks are identical. Kerry Valencia asks, what is your favourite Dalek? My favourite individual Dalek is without a doubt Dalek Zek. That's probably come across quite clearly already with the amount of times I've talked about him on the channel and presented increasingly ludicrous theories as to how he might someday return somehow. It's not just the cool casing design that I love about Zek though, it's also the fact that he's uniquely gifted among Daleks, being one of the few to break out of the miasma of Davros's conditioning and realise that their way of life is wrong. I love his witty, bitchy backtalk he gives to the Cyber Leader and even his own cult members, and I even like the Dalek-Zek hybrid, both in terms of design and character development. Hopefully Big Finish picks up the Cult of Skaro for like a prequel series or something, because I'd love any excuse to hear more from them. Windrin1234 asks, you're already aware of the Dalek Time Control and the Dalek Time Strategist. My question is, if they decided to create a third variation of this special time-sensitive line of Dalek, what would you call it, what would it look like, and what would be its purpose? That's a good question. I've considered it and decided I'd create a sort of bureaucrat time Dalek called the Dalek Time Reconciler. The idea being that the Dalek Eternal's efforts to maintain consistency in the ever-overlapping and contradictory nature of the Dalek timeline requires a small group of field agents who travel to critical points in Dalek history to mediate disputes between different groups of Daleks. For example, we know that the Silver Daleks can travel in time. What if they encountered the more primitive Grey Daleks from Genesis of the Daleks? In the crisscrossing nature of Dalek history, such meetings are inevitable. Would they always lead to civil war? Any two given types of Daleks are functionally distinct and clearly look different, so shouldn't they hate each other? In order to establish the harmonious union of Dalek designs we see in Series 9, in which a Renegade Dalek and an Imperial Special Weapons Dalek can work together, there must be some force that brokered peace. Was it Davros? Was it the Dalek Parliament? Or was it a clandestine cult of Dalek Eternal fanatics whose job it is to constantly patch up the Dalek timeline? I reckon there's a story in there. In terms of what they'd look like, I don't know, like the Dalek time controller but pink, and with even more neck rings. Graham Turner asks, how about the Offscreen Daleks of the TV movie with the weird voices? Ah yes, truly awful Dalek voices from the prologue to the TV movie. I'll do a full video on this one day. I need to listen to that Master audio series with Eric Roberts, as that apparently elaborates more on the trial. I think the Dalek litigator is involved, and that might offer an explanation as to why the voices are so weird. I'll look into it. Behind the scenes, of course, we know the real reason is that the people making the TV movie apparently cared enough about Doctor Who to have the film follow the same continuity as the show, but didn't care enough to implement any of those elements in a way that even remotely made sense. Still, like a lot of Doctor Who, it's a really fun watch despite the nonsense, or maybe because of it. Alex Jefford asks, I'm thinking of trying a couple of Dalek customs and I'm wondering if you have any advice for anyone who's thinking of trying. That's a fantastic question. My advice is choose a relatively cheap and common Dalek toy to paint, like the chunky bronze Daleks or one of the classic Daleks from the Collector's Set 2, and choose a relatively simple colour scheme to start with. I use Citadel paints and brushes for my customs, but there are alternatives like Humbrol and other model paint brands, many of which are good for custom figures of all kinds. There's lots of techniques that I've picked up over the years, like dry brushing and using precision brushes for the hemispheres and minute detailing, but honestly the best way to learn is just practice. Try out a few customs and see what happens. If you think they look bad, don't worry, just wait for them to dry or apply some water and terps and you can try again. Many of my customs are figures that I've been working on for years, constantly adding new coats and touch-ups to refine the paintwork and improve the customs with new techniques. Try some experiments and see what works. It's a really fun process. Someone asked on one of my custom shorts how many Dalek figures I have in my collection. This is a question that's popped up a few times, so I'll answer it here. I haven't done a complete count for a while now, mostly because the collection is spread across various rooms, some of it's in storage, etc, etc, but combining my boxed, unboxed and custom Dalek figures, the total is over 400, probably pushing 450. For context, I have nearly 100 customs of damaged, destroyed or asylum-bound Daleks alone, all of which came from battered or damaged Dalek toys that I'd picked up from car boot sales or were given to by friends who would otherwise have thrown them away. I am very fortunate to have so many Daleks, and it might seem like an excessive amount, but bear in mind I've been collecting for over a decade, and the majority of my Daleks are not just simple display pieces, but also my own art. Anthony Avellino asks, where do you think the Paradigm Dalek Eternal is, and do you think the Paradigm will return? Personally, I think the Dalek Eternal is out there somewhere, probably hiding out in a pocket universe or far back into the past in the Dark Times or something, constantly watching over Dalek history and ensuring that the species will always survive. It's the only satisfying conclusion I can reach for a Dalek called Eternal, who showed up twice, did nothing and never appeared again. The alternative is that it was just blown up like the other Paradigm Daleks, which isn't really befitting the title of Eternal in my opinion. I do hope that the Paradigm Daleks will return, but more importantly, I want the story of the Daleks to be a significant contributor to the story of the show again. During the Russell T Davies era, the Daleks being constantly on the brink of extinction meant that any significant event in the history of the Daleks was also a significant event in the plot of the series, whereas now an entire parliament of Daleks can be blown up and it doesn't really have any impact other than bad guys go boom. If the Paradigm Daleks do return, I want it to be done in a story-focused way that provides satisfying answers and furthers the Dalek story. Having one randomly show up in the background Series 9 style will be cheap. If they're going to come back, then it has to be done properly. Connor asks, what villains are you into besides Daleks? I'm a huge sci-fi fan, so lots of my favourite villain factions come from various other sci-fi franchises. The Covenant from Halo, the Xenomorphs and Yautja from the Alien Predator franchise, the CIS from Star Wars, the Dominion from Star Trek, etc. I also love many of the other Doctor Who villains like Cybermen and, of course, the Quarks. One can never forget the Quarks. But I'm also a big fan of individual villains who undergo a significant change in their character as their story unfolds, especially if that change leads to reflection on what a villain even is. I'm thinking the likes of Arbiter, Kreia, Zuko, Missy, Michael, all of whom are among the most interesting characters in their respective franchises, and for good reason. I know that doesn't really reflect much on the Daleks, so I guess you can apply that logic to the likes of Dalek and Rusty, but you know, not every passion I have has to ultimately feed back to the Daleks, just most of them. The Stylish One asks, what are your favourite and least favourite Dalek audios and why? Well, I recently posted a top 5 Dalek audios video, but to be fair, that was focused primarily on the longer stories like the Main Range and the EDA's two-parters, so I'll take the opportunity here to give a shout out to basically all of the Dalek stories from the 8th Doctor Time War box sets, particularly Planet of the Ogrons, In the Garden of Death, Palindrome and Restoration of the Daleks. I'm also a big fan of Dalek Universe, the David Tennant series. In terms of least favourite Dalek audios, I don't want to be harsh, you know, they're all so great in their own way, you know, it wouldn't really be fair, but Renaissance of the Daleks. renaissance of the Daleks. It makes no sense. I don't get it. I've heard it 3 times and I don't know what the heck is going on. What is that cover art? Why is it a renaissance? What? It's bizarre. Apparently it had really serious behind the scenes problems and it shows. I'd say it's worth checking out just for how bizarre it is. There's also Dalek audios that I think I would like if I had more context for them, but currently I don't have the context because to get it you need to listen to an entire story arc. Daleks Among Us, for example. Graham Law asks, would you ever do Cyberman videos, design rankings, story reviews as you do for the Daleks? I've thought about this sometimes. I remember on one of the comments on my old Dalek clip videos, someone suggested I make a channel called Cyber Handles and basically do the exact same thing as Dalek Bumps but for Cybermen instead of Daleks. It's a fun idea, but right now between my job, my hobbies, my channel and all the other aspects of everyday life, I have more than enough to keep me busy for now, but maybe one day. You might see a cyber themed video on this channel next April Fools or something, that might be fun. In the meantime, if anyone else wants to claim the mantle of Cyber Handles, feel free, just make sure to do it right. Pipsy Productions asks, do you prefer Supremes or Emperors? Personally I prefer Supremes. I'm happy with the number of Dalek Emperors there currently are, the original, the Restoration Emperor, the God of all Daleks, and I guess also the 2 brief Paradigm Emperors, but I think the title of Emperor Dalek should be retired now, as the more there are, the less impact it has. Supremes are a different story, there can be as many Supremes as needed, and the rank is very versatile, able to act as a leader of the Daleks, a steward to another high-ranking Dalek, and a capable mobile Dalek unit in its own right. Hopefully we'll see more varieties of Dalek leader in future stories. Finally, Special Weapons Dalek asks, why aren't I featured in more stories, as the Special Weapons Dalek is clearly the best Dalek variant? I don't know Special Weapons Dalek, I honestly don't know why they went to all the trouble of bringing you back not once but twice in New Who, and didn't even let you fire the cannon. You know, the singular reason why Special Weapons Daleks exist in the first place that they're completely redundant without. Let's hope Russell T Davies dreams up some powerful threat for the Daleks to fight in the new series that warrants a Special Weapons Dalek making a return. The fact that we had the opportunity to see the Special Weapons Dalek blow up the TARDIS in Series 9 and it didn't happen needs rectifying. There we go, a nice reference to the first lore videos on the channel to round off the video. Thanks for all your interesting and thought-provoking questions. I hope you've enjoyed listening to me rant about Daleks, not just on this video but on any given video on this channel. A big thank you to everyone who has subscribed to Dalek Bumps, especially those who like the videos and leave comments. I've really enjoyed making these Dalek videos, but I've equally enjoyed reading everyone's thoughts about each daily topic, answering questions and engaging in discussion about all things Dalek. I couldn't ask for a more engaging, supportive community, so thank you once again and Merry Christmas.